Moeletsi Mbeki, so this book, Advocates of Change, How to Overcome Africa's Challenges, what's the essence?
Well, the essence of the book is that many people diagnose what Africa's problems are, and I think we all know what this, by now we all know what the diagnosis is. However, here we are looking at specific sectors, critical parts of how to get the African economies moving forward. For example, we look at the mining sector, we look at small-scale agriculture, we look at the South African economy, which plays a very important role in the general welfare of Southern Africa in particular. So, but there are lots of other issues we address.
You've also written another book that was highly acclaimed, Architects of Poverty, Why African Capitalism Needs Changing. How does this book take the central thesis of that book forward?
Well, the two books are actually complementary, because Architects of Poverty was looking at what were the causes of Africa's poverty, who were the culprits, not in the traditional sense of looking at the colonialists, which is the way in which the elite in Africa absolve themselves for their underperformance, the way in which African governments try to excuse themselves for underperformance. So I was looking at what the African governments have done in the 50 years since the independence of the African continent, and identifying who the culprit was in the last 50 years. This book is now looking at what are the solutions.
So what solutions then are being proffered?
Well, for example, if we look at the mining sector, we have a very prominent geologist who points out that we have to use the profit from mining not to consume it, which is what we are doing now, but to invest, to develop sustainable industries so that when the resource runs out, we have a sustainable industrial base. If I can give you an example, if you take the petroleum industry, Africa is a large petroleum producer, but if you look at how many people work in petrochemicals in the countries that produce oil compared to how many people work in petrochemical industries in Taiwan, for example, you find a huge disparity. Taiwan employs over 300,000, 600,000 people in the petrochemical industry. In Africa, Nigeria, which is a large exporter, doesn't even process its own petrol and diesel. It has to import them.
I mean, some would say, you know, you're talking about beneficiation is the term that's being used these days, industrialization, for instance, and those are things we all know. So your book's not actually offering new solutions.
No, it's not things we all know because we're not doing them. There's only one.
We're not doing them because we don't know, or we're not doing them because we don't care enough.
No, it's both. It's because we don't know, and also because the powers that be don't care enough. But they also don't know. They don't know what to do. Africa is actually deindustrializing, including South Africa itself.
Okay, so you also talk about other themes, entrepreneurship, education, society. Now, these are very important because we're dealing now with the modern challenge of youth unemployment. We're talking about a need for more local investment in African economies. We're talking about skills. These seem to be very critical facets of why we're being held back, especially at this juncture.
Yes, we have a contributor who looks at the South African education system, for example, and he identifies the role that the trade unions in the education sector are playing to block the development of the education of the population of South Africa, especially of the African population in South Africa. So these are some of the issues that we are now addressing as to what to do with the power of the unions to frustrate the development of skills by blocking the effective functioning of the education system. We also look at the health of the African population and what to do about the falling life expectancy of the people of Africa. what are the real causes and what to do about those causes.
What if leaders reading your book would say, oh please, we've been trying to address the problems, we've got more public investment in education, we've committed to the Millennium Development Goals, we're seeing average growth rates in Africa somewhere in the region of 5%, we've made policy shifts and reforms, we are starting to see tangible change, it may not be fast enough but there's change.
No, it's actually not true. If you look at a country the size of Nigeria, 150 million people, the size of the manufacturing sector in Nigeria is 3% of gross domestic product. Now that is not development, it's a sinking economy. If you look at China, the manufacturing as a percentage of gross domestic product in China is 45%. So what is Nigeria? Nigeria has become a market for China. And this applies to virtually all African countries, including South Africa. So now what we are saying is we must develop our own entrepreneurs, and this is how you develop entrepreneurs in order to reverse the situation. The African governments are not developing entrepreneurs. Right. They are actually buying more and more and more from China and selling more and more raw materials.
Entrepreneurship 101 in this book, how do you address the situation quite quickly?
Well, the core of entrepreneurship is actually a technical education. Without technical education, and in Africa, we have very little technical education. And that is the core of the problem.
And I mean, we've absolutely run out of time, but some of the contributors, you've mentioned that you've got geologists, for instance, speaking to the mining issues. What other expertise is here?
Well, we have an economist from Malawi who is Professor for African Studies Development at the London School of Economics, looking at the whole problem of reindustrializing Africa, what should be done to reindustrialize Africa. We have a political scientist from Kenya who's looking at the whole process of pseudo-democracy that we have been living with in Africa since the 90s. We have the Secretary General of the Common Market from Eastern and Southern Africa explaining why regional integration is not working on the African continent.
Okay, thanks so much, and we hope to just get more people reading this book written by acclaimed political commentator Moeletsi Mbeki, Advocates of Change, How to Overcome Africa's Challenges.